somewhere or the other in your life, and at some point in time you had to take history. Some of you may have loved it, and some of you may have hated it. This is a kind of a history lesson. My presentation is kind of a history lesson. Although this machine that I'm going to explain is new in the sense that the parts are all new. It's also has a historical element. I've got a long history, but I'm not a player, and I don't make sound. I don't play it well. I really don't play an instrument. In the '60s, I was a professional singer, but I don't do that anymore. So my reason for being in the music I'm into is to make instruments, not to make sounds. And the essence of what I get out of this is I could play 10, 15 minutes of different Oberheim tunes that people have used Oberheims on, but I'll just play one, and just for a couple minutes, even though, okay, you were probably, even if you were born in 1980s, you probably still know this song. It's the ultimate all-time Oberheim demo record. This has nothing to do with the resurgence of analog, although it is an analog sound. But the only reason I'm bringing it up is who am I, what am I? I build these instruments, musicians use them, and it's made for a great live. So, are we? No. Sound is all Oberheim from start to finish. The reason I want to play that is because I hope in your musical lives you'll do something, whether it's your own music or somebody does something with your music and it brings tears to your eyes. Well, this does that still for me. Anyway, that's just kind of an introduction to who I am. I don't, like I say, I don't plan, I don't make music, I just make the instrument. And I've been doing that since the 70s. I started out 1970 building guitar pedal gadgets. You may or may not have used phase shifters. I had the first phase shifter that was on the market in 71 or 72. In 73, I had a little business just myself, and I was looking for ways to supplement my income, so I became a West Coast dealer for a synthesizer company called ARC. I don't know if you've had any experience with ARC. And fell in love with the whole idea of synthesizers. And to make a long story short, I got on the map in 75 when I had the first polyphonic synthesizers you could buy in a music store. Up to that point, all through the 60s and the first half of the 70s, all synths were monophonic. You could only play one note at a time. I had the first polyphonic machine. And so from 75 to 85, I built synths along with, in competition with Dave Smith and Roland and Yamaha and whatever. And the progression was this four-voice I mentioned, the first four-voice, and then there was a thing called an OBX, OBXA, OB8, Matrix 12, Matrix 6. And then in 1985, my trusted lawyer of 15 years ended up with the company, and my life odyssey just went through a lot of changes from 85. Basically, I tried another synthesizer project in the 90s that was a total disaster. And then I just became an engineer in Silicon Valley and thought my days in synthesizers were over. How many of you have ever heard of the Red Bull Music Academy? Any of you? Okay, good. Okay. So I was, by 2007, 2008, I was pretty much done working in industry, and I was, I guess, considered retired. Really hating it because I don't golf, fish, et cetera, et cetera. I just, like working in my lab. And I got an invite to the 2008 Red Bull Music Academy event in Barcelona, Spain. At that point in time, I knew absolutely nothing about what we now call EDM or DJ, producer, music. I had no idea what it was. I had no knowledge of the phenomenon it is, nothing. I just didn't know what it was. But I said, oh, free trip to Barcelona, I'll take that. So I went, and for those who don't know exactly what it is, Red Bull's, Red Bull sponsors this organization. It's some guys out of Cologne, Germany that, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like a contest, and you can enter the contest by filling out a form and sending them music, and they get several thousand entries a year, and they pick 50, and those 50 people get to go, all expenses paid, to wherever they have it. They have a different city every year, and make music in the or listen to old timers like me, or not, they're not always old timers, but industry veterans talk about their life, and then in the afternoon and the evening, early evening, they have studios set up where people are, the participants are expected to make music, and then at night they go out to clubs and DJ clubs. And so I got there and I said, what is this stuff? What is this EDM? What is, it's all got this same thing just going boom, boom, boom. What is it all about? And I got there, and the Red Bull music guy said, can you bring one of your synthesizers? I didn't want to take one of my big 5-octave things, so I took one of my synth modules. This has two. You can see that these two modules here. I took one of just this little thing here. Figured, maybe there'll be somebody there that's interested. So I got there, and it's an interview kind of a thing. And so after my interview, I did have one of these modules that had a little MIDI circuit in it and hooked up to a keyboard, and of course I did my thing, which is very interesting, but several guys come up, and by the end of the day I had 4 of them sold, even though I wasn't making them. So I came home from Barcelona and I said, well, I really don't like what I'm doing. At the time I was volunteering at Exploratorium. I hated it because it's not that the place is great, but what I was doing wasn't great. And I thought, well, maybe I'll build a few of these. So, and at that point in time I had really no idea that the analog revolution was in full swing. And so I thought, well, I'll make a few of these in my garage and it'll be fun. And so I figured I'd sell 2 or 3 a month. Well, in 3.5 years, I've sold almost 1,000 of them. And that's just this module with no support or anything. So I'm back in the business. And the module I'm talking about, I first designed and sold way back in 1974. And the idea at the time was to use it with a Minimoog or an ARP synthesizer, or one of the other synthesizers that make the sound bigger. I wasn't really thinking of getting in the synthesizer business in full force. But once I got this module done, it occurred to me one day that I could take 4 of these modules and some digital circuitry that would scan a keyboard and make a polyphonic synthesizer. And again, I thought, well, they're expensive and hard to use, but I'll sell a few. Well, of course, until Prophet 5 came out in 1978, it had a real company. I was selling a lot of them. It was the only game in town if you wanted a synthesizer that could play with more than one note. And then, so things went along, and in 1975, one of the things I did was I put two of these modules together with a 3-octave keyboard and a little knob sequencer. I call it the Oberheim 2-voice, and it was always my favorite machine because it's fun to play. I'm not a keyboard player, but there's things I can do in it which I'll show you that make it fun. So when this latest thing happened, I started having some success selling just the module by itself. I said, well, I've got to build a 2-voice, and even if I don't sell anything, I want one for myself, because that's one thing I didn't have. I wanted a 2-voice and didn't have one. So I started on this about 1.5 years ago, and I've only been able to spend about a day a week putting it together because I've been so busy building the little modules. So it's almost, this is the Oberheim 2-voice. Maybe, oh yeah, you got that picture up there. It's two of my synthesizer modules and a little sequencer. In its basic form, it's pretty much like the machine I did in 1975 in that the modules are the same. The sequencer I had in 1975 was pretty simple. It could do 2 separate 8-note or 8-step sequences, which are, you set them in with knobs, just like a classic analog sequencer. But whereas I kept the synthesizer module exactly like it was in the 1970s, the same circuitry. I had to change a couple things. The company that made the pots, and they don't make those pots anymore, but really it's the same basic circuitry. It sounds just like the old ones. But with the sequencer, I took a little different approach. It's still a knob sequencer, but unlike the first one, the one from the original in 1975, where you could set a sequence in the knobs, and you wanted a different sequence, you had to change the knobs. There was no storage. This one, the knob positions can be stored in flash memory, so you can have up to 50 sequences stored in the machine. You can edit those sequences in a couple of ways that make it kind of interesting, and you can also chain together sequences and make songs. So that's a brief history. And what I'm going to talk about now is this machine, this new version of the 2-voice. But so my 4-voice and my 8-voice machines were legitimate keyboard instruments, as evidenced by used on thousands of records. But the 2-voice, although it is you can do 2-voice polyphony, it's only modest use. The other mode it can go is where it can play a 2-voice polyphonic sequence. And I've already programmed this into the memory. So one voice is doing that, the other voice is doing that. So it's a true polyphonic, the 2-voice polyphonic sequence. And I'll explain in a minute how that's done. And then the third mode is one of each, and so you can. Okay. Oh. So you can have a sequence in one, playing one module, and then you can have the keyboard play the other. If you know how to play keyboard, you can have the keyboard play the other voice. And in addition, you can transpose. Let me just you can use the You can split the keyboard. So now we have, the way the arrangement I have here is I have the sequence playing, transposed by, sorry about that. And then you can play along with it. So it's got the three modes: two-voice polyphonic keyboard, two-voice polyphonic sequencing, or one of each, which is, for someone like me that's not really a keyboard player, it's nice to play around, at least by myself. The sequencer is much different than the one that was in the original 1975 version because of the ability to edit sequences. One thing you can do is you can do what I call, it's probably got a better name, but I ended up using this name. You can edit in what's called ratcheting, where ratchet 2 would double in one step of the sequence. It would double the number of gates. So that's not the one I wanted. Here. Okay, so what I've done here is this was, let me slow it down. You notice that in this case the rhythm isn't just the rigid step, 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 but there's a doubling of one of the notes. In fact, this one's doubling one and tripling one. So that can make for some interesting stuff. And then, as you heard in the sequence before I edited, you can also do a rest. And just like I'm not much of a player, I'm almost not much of a programmer, so there's a lot of possibilities which already a couple of my musician friends have shown me that come up with some very interesting things, because it's not just the pure clock stepping through without any variation. The other thing you can do is you can well, first of all, you can program up to 50 sequences, and each one of those can be a polyphonic sequence. Then you can chain together the sequences into songs, where each step in the song can be, you can choose what sequence you want, you can transpose it up and down as much as you want, and you can repeat each step. So this this sequence here by itself, I made it into a song, and it's etc., etc. So that's the essence of the machine, in addition to these features involving, of course, the synthesizers are the classic SEM from the 70s that a lot of people like. And that, coupled with the sequencer, makes for some interesting sounds. As a performance machine, it has, of course, the standard wheels, and it has a separate vibrato oscillator, and there's pressure and velocity that has a modest use in the machine. So that's the essence of it. it's just a joy to be doing this at my age, and I'm very happy that, you know, I've probably got several hundred of them sold. When they're done, that probably won't be done for another couple months, but that's basically it. I've got one more thing that I'd like to play. I put together, it wasn't this machine, I put together a much rougher prototype. I sent it down to him. He got it at 10:30 in the morning, and at 1:30 the piece he did, which I'm going to play for you, was in my inbox. And it's like, wow, it just lifted me up. This is, well, there's no manual. I mean, I didn't send him a manual. He had to take it the way it was, figure it out, make the piece, and record it, and so it really cheered me up. Anyway, it goes on for a couple more minutes. And in that short amount of time, he was able to figure out the thing. And as you may have noticed, he used one of the editing things you can edit is the gate length. So it starts out and then it quickly goes no. So that's it's all stored in the sequence. Change the gate length so it gets quite a bit different. You may have heard some of the ratcheting where that kind of thing, and it's all, well, it's not this machine, but it's all of the earlier prototype. There's no other sounds in it but this machine. There is a couple overdubs on the sustained sound. You might have heard a low bass sound, but basically most of what you heard was live, the sequencer playing live. And no drum machine, no other synths, just this. So,
wow.
And that's the one and only demo so far. So I've got I think a lot to look forward to.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Tom. Would you like to field some questions?
Yeah, sure. It's a classic analog synth with two oscillators, filter. In this case, it's a multi-mode filter, low pass, high pass, VCA, and two envelope generators. Very simple. It is not Curtis chips. In the history of my company, in my first company, which is now long gone, I started out with this module, which doesn't use any custom chips at all. When I decided to build a four-voice, one of the things I did with the four-voice is I made a program that allowed some of the parameters to be stored, and I was Doug Curtis' first customer. And then we stayed with this circuitry on the OBX, but the OBX-A, OB8, Matrix 12, Expander were Curtis chips. Doug was a very close friend of mine, very healthy, very active, a genius circuit designer who died about 2.5 years ago of pancreatic cancer. So they're the only Curtis chips that are still being used I don't know who all, but Dave Smith uses one of the one remaining Curtis chip that I know of in his stuff, and his widow has kept the company going on a small level. So, and there's no Curtis chips. There's nothing custom, no custom parts in this. It's all right off the electronic shelf. But the module is 100% analog. The oscillators are classic analog oscillators that, if they're not designed right, they drift all over the place. These don't drift very much. The filter is analog, like in the MoFo and all of those. The envelope generators are analog. They're not generated by a microprocessor. They're analog. So the difference is that, well, there's two big differences in the sound between the SEM, my SEM module, and let's say what Dave Smith is doing and what other companies are doing. But certainly the ones I know about is Dave uses the last remaining Curtis chip that has a 4-pole filter and a VCA. All of Dave's stuff, including all the way up to the Matrix 12, the oscillators are digitally, the frequencies are digitally generated. In the case of the MoFo and the Evolver stuff, the waveform is, the oscillator waveforms are analog, but the frequency generation is digital. So this is pure analog, whereas Dave is kind of a hybrid. And I always say Matrix 12. The Prophet 12 is he admits, it's a hybrid, and so you can easily get into a philosophical argument about does it matter if it's 100% analog? Well, who knows? It's up to each individual. In my case, I am committed to keeping the analog VCOs and basically I'm not you. I have the luxury that I don't have to sell these to make a living, that I can make them all analog, and that's what I want to do. Sorry?
I think it's a lot more difficult to do these filters and keep them kind of sequencing and
It's difficult, but I had, this is the synthesizer was designed in '74 by, I didn't design it, it was designed by three people who were experts in the field in 1974, and it hasn't gotten any better because it didn't have to. It's what it is. It's for those of you that are technically oriented, one of the things that's kind of I really love that's kind of shows the difference between the technical aspect of this in 1974 and now, I think, at least I think so, is the classic filter, of course, in synthesis is the Moog ladder filter. It's the top, it's the filter that everybody tries to emulate. And to some extent, Doug Curtis, whom some of you obviously know who he was, in his filter, he tried to get as close to that sound. And an aspect of that, of the Moog filter as well as the Curtis filter, was that as the resonance was turned up, he brought, both Bob and Doug brought the gain and the rest of the pass band of the filter, he brought the gain down so that as you turned up the resonance, you didn't distort what was following it. Okay, but this filter I use, it's the kind of filter that you can't do that, and so I got a lot of complaints. Well, if I turn the resonance up, it distorts. So that was the 70s. Now it's the same exact filter, and people say, "I love it when I turn it up." So it's that's kind of a fun thing. So.
Yeah. Are you ever considering revisiting like the OBXA or the expander or that sort of thing?
No, and that's for the very reason I mentioned earlier, that the Curtis chips no longer exist.
Yeah.
So that you can't, I have a plan for for 2014 that will be how should I put it? Conceptually like the bigger stuff I did at Oberheim. That's even bigger. But both, number one, there are no Curtis chips, but number two, it's going to be the circuitry of the SEMs, because that's one of the things that this, I don't know what I'd be doing if this Red Bull thing hadn't come along, because I was pretty much figured out, it's over, and of course at the same time that I went to Barcelona for the Red Bull thing, I had no clue that analog was making this revival. I was really kind of in another space then. And so not only did the Red Bull thing kind of get me going, but as soon as I was in it, I was discovering there's this monstrous analog revival. And some magazine I read recently, there's 80 companies making modular analog here. Now, it's probably a lot of them are one guy in a garage who makes two modular, I don't know. But it's huge. Another friend told me that Doppler builds more synthesizer gear than Roland, which is almost impossible for me to believe, because I think Doppler is him and his wife. But anyway, it's huge. And next year should be interesting. Yes, sir.
It's time for one or two more questions.
First, let me say one of my first synths in the 80s was a Matrix 6. It was insanely inspiring and annoying in a good way, and unbelievably aggressive and super soft, and everything I want out of it's a killer. Is there any technological advancements in analog circuitry or designs that you're excited about using in current designs? Or
I'm not interested in that. Okay, I'm 77 years old. I'm not. It's enough to get one of these things built, working, and sold. I'm not doing it for the money because my wife's still working and the mortgage is paid. I do it for the fun of it. But I think the answer to your question is that because of the rush, and during my first company, there was such a rush to build the next machine because, I'd do something and Dave would do something and I'd have to do something, and back and forth until both our companies went out of business around 1985, this for different reasons. And that there's a whole trail of stuff that I knew about and wanted to try back in the 70s and early 80s. I don't have, well, I guess you'd say it's new because maybe my machines don't have it in them, but I know about it, And I will, to my dying day, say that analog sounds better, and I got a lot of reasons why, but it's expensive, so that's a problem.
it's an honor to meet you.
Okay.
Okay, last question? Any last questions? No?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I noticed a lot of these settings, with the waves, they never include sine waves. Is there a reason behind that with the synthesizer makers? Because I know it's always either a saw or a triangle.
Boring.
That's all it is, because it's boring. Huh?
I mean, what if you went to the symphony and the trumpets and the strings and the all the woodwinds put out sine waves? It'd be really, really boring.
Nice.
At least I'm talking classic. I mean, in this day and age, anything's possible. But I think that the reason is, first of all, the tradition of analog synthesis started out when electronic parts were expensive, and so you had to get as much out of a certain amount of circuitry as possible for economic reasons. And it's more complicated to make a sine wave oscillator than it is to make a sawtooth or oscillator. When it's in a synthesizer familiar, because you've got, analog synthesizer filters have to cover a tremendous range. You have to go from 16 hertz to 10, 15 kilohertz, and the circuitry to do that it was hard then and it's hard now. So, and to make a sine wave oscillator that can go over that range and have the exponential frequency characteristic that the way our ears work, it's more complicated than a sawtooth. Okay?
All right, thank you.